Test, test. Commissioner Shelton, can you test your mic?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's work session meeting of the June 5th Planning Commission. We have a couple of items on the agenda for our business meeting at 6 o'clock, which will include taking a look at form-based code and reviewing some meeting minutes. And then for the work session, we will be discussing form-based code and also have a presentation and discussion about Old Mill. And just for clarification, I think there was some incorrect information published that at the 5 o'clock meeting, this work session, there is no public input. Public input will be at 6 o'clock. Okay, so the 5 o'clock meeting is a work session for the Planning Commission to discuss, ask questions, whatever that might be. So just clarification that way. So sorry for any confusion for anyone, but I also think there's a lot to be learned by attending the work session. So glad you're all here. Glad there's such engagement, and we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to start with form-based code. And we're looking at probably a half hour for each topic, but it could be, we'll see how things go with the form-based code.
Yeah, that works. It's a little bit weird being in this room for this meeting, so our format, it does feel a little different. If it's okay with the commission, I think I'll just present from here like we would in a work session, and then in the 6 p.m. business session, I can stand and do that if we need. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen to the Zoom. And it does look like Commissioner Ebler was able to join us on the Zoom, so
Right.
we're grateful.
Oh,
for
and
his-
I should note, I apologize that we have 3 commissioners online, Mike Shelton,
It's two.
oh, just 2, sorry.
Yeah.
Just, and then Commissioner Ebler.
Yes.
So,
Great. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. We've talked a lot about form-based code over the years. But I'm joined tonight by our consultant, Mark from VODA. You guys know Mark, and he's here as kind of an additional resource. I'm gonna take us through some basic slides, and then there will be time for questions from the commission, if we need. Just kind of situating my Zoom windows, so bear with me. Okay, so I wanted to start with giving just a real quick recap of kind of the what and why of form-based codes. So at the heart of it, form-based codes are a way of regulating development. Conventional zoning ordinances really regulate development by primarily the use of a building, such as what specific business is allowed in it. And the form of a building is a secondary consideration in kind of a conventional ordinance. Form-based codes flip that emphasis. So the form-based codes primarily regulate the form of a building, such as its massing, public space, quality, and the use of the building is still regulated, but it's a secondary consideration. I want to note that form-based codes don't affect single-family development. It's a tool for kind of reimagining commercial, multifamily, and mixed-use developments. It doesn't affect single-family properties. And some of the value of doing a form-based code is because you have the emphasis on building form, you get development that's higher quality, has more of a consistent community identity or feel, and can accommodate a wide variety of uses as businesses change throughout the years. And then they also provide property owners with greater flexibility for redevelopment options if they decide to redevelop in the future. So a little bit of timeline, just to kind of recap where we've been and where we are now. So way back in 2020, staff was directed by the city council to begin exploring a form-based code for a portion of the Fort Union Boulevard corridor. And this has been a longstanding recommendation from city master plans, including the Fort Union Boulevard master plan. So we hired a consultant, we hired VODA to help us draft a form-based code. And over the past 4 years, we've been working on that draft. Each iteration of the draft has been shaped by feedback from the commission and the city council. And then in March of this year, we held a public open house, and public input from that open house also was incorporated into the final draft. So this draft is now ready for formal review and potential recommendation by the Planning Commission. The city council is the final decision authority. So if a motion is made tonight on the form-based code, it would be formatted as a recommendation to the city council. You do not have to make a motion on this tonight, but just keep that in mind if you decide to do that. I wanted to put a fun slide in here to thank you. I don't get to use confetti very much in professional capacities. So just wanted to give a very heartfelt thank you to community members, if any of you in the audience were part of the feedback process. To the Planning Commission and the City Council who provided feedback. It did really shape the project, and I think it made the final draft a stronger, more representative iteration. So it is genuinely appreciated. Okay, so now getting into what is proposed. So I'll recap just the overall, and then Mark has some slides that take us through sort of the general tenets of the form-based code. So the proposed form-based code will only apply to properties that are currently commercial, multifamily, or mixed use along a section of the Fort Union Boulevard corridor. And we have a map that we'll pull up. So again, it doesn't affect single family. All property owners within this potential boundary were invited to that open house, and were also sent a mailed notice for this meeting. So notice did go out to affected owners. The kind of mechanically, the proposed form-based code is a zoning map amendment because it does change the existing zoning. It's also a zoning text amendment because it alters our city code to add a chapter for regulations. So we have like labeled it as a zoning map amendment, but I wanted to mention that it's kind of a unique project and that it's both things at once. And also wanted to mention, if adopted, the form-based code doesn't prevent existing development from continuing as is, including maintenance and minor changes. It just affects properties that willingly redevelop in the boundary. Okay, and then maybe I'll turn it over to you, Mark. I think this microphone should be an option if you want to click it on. And then I'll give you the mouse and you can
Great.
drive us.
Great, thanks, Sam. Good to be with you again. As Sam mentioned, the form-based code is meant to be applied to a few specific nodes along the Fort Union Boulevard. The beginning of this process, if you recall, we really pulled goals and objectives from the existing plans and policies on the books within the city. The intention with the form-based code is really to implement those goals and objectives. So as Sam mentioned, it really allows for a wider variety of use. As we know, buildings change their use over time. No business is there forever. And what we're looking at is how do we make development that is reusable over many, many decades. The focus really is where that building is located on the property and how it supports the public right-of-way, making places more walkable, making it more of a neighborhood centric type of development. The options for use really is far more flexible for property owners. So the benefit there, if a property owner chooses to redevelop, there's a wide range of uses that they can choose from. And again, existing uses and businesses are unchanged with the code update. So again, the parts of the city that this is applied to is really just these three nodes along Fort Union. The rest of the city really is unchanged with this. And from the get-go, we've been talking about other cities that are currently using form-based code. There are several cities across the Wasatch Front that have been using a form-based code for several years. And during this process, we consulted with other cities using form-based code to really understand how we could best calibrate it for success for Cottonwood Heights. The code itself, as Sam mentioned, is really focused on the form of development. What does it look like? These are not architectural standards. They're not prescriptive as to the style of development. It's really looking at how does that form implement a lot of those community goals, walkability, community-focused development, those types of things. The process is one, if you recall, we've talked about several times with this group and with the city council. The intention is that the form-based code provides a more clear roadmap for not only property owners, but also planning staff, planning commission, and the city council. Here on the bottom of the screen, you see there's a worksheet that basically makes it a step-by-step process for a property owner to go through that application process. As you recall, we've talked a bit about having some properties, if they're under a certain size, if they meet all of the requirements of the form-based code, those smaller projects could be approved administratively by planning staff, freeing up more time for the planning commission and city council to focus on those larger development proposals.
Okay. Back to me. What a rare opportunity to like be news anchors back to back here. So I put this slide in. The next few slides are pretty based on our next meeting, the business session, kind of just providing a resource if you do make a motion. I'll just mention them now, and then of course we can come back to them in the 6 p.m. session. So staff does recommend that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for this form-based code. Again, the City Council is the final approval authority for this type of project. And then our findings are as follows. A public hearing was held. It will be held in the business session. Notice of such public hearing was provided to all property owners within the proposed boundary. The proposed form-based code is consistent with goals of the adopted Fort Union Boulevard Master Plan and General Plan. And the proposed form-based code is compatible with surrounding neighborhoods more so than the existing combination of multiple different types of zoning. And those were in our staff report as well, with some additional analysis. I have the model motions if you need them in our next meeting. And then that's the end of kind of the recap content we provided. I hope that commissioners had a chance to read through the draft that was sent out. And I think now, so we're about 13 minutes into the meeting, we should have a little bit of time for questions. If there are items you want to discuss, yeah, happy to answer.
I'll jump in. In the document you sent, I'm sorry, I don't think it's here. On page 35, it's talking about height and stories versus feet or however we want to measure. Well, is that something that would we define that? I mean, because a story is up for interpretation, right?
Correct. Height is regulated with both of those, where we have story count and also maximum height per story. So
Okay,
each of these form districts, so as you recall, we have 4 form districts to be applied. Each of those has a different height limitation. But as I mentioned, we've got a maximum story count, but also to say, okay, here's the maximum height that each of those stories.
so
Good.
where I see under height, the like 7, 8, 9 on theirs, I see stories and I see ground floor, but I don't see.
And then the upper floor height would be for additional storage.
Oh, so those are for all. I interpreted upper floor to mean top,
Ah,
the top
That's a good
floor. So that's
clarification.
why
yeah, that's a good
my
clarification.
my
to me.
confusion. So
We can clarify that in the text, just.
that'd be
as-
great.
yeah,
That just
yeah, of course.
because someone, who's not familiar with it, it'd be good.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and the height, really the height allowances here in these districts are not different from what is currently permitted. I'd say this is a little bit more specific. Really saying, okay, ground floor height, we really want a taller ground floor in most projects.
Exactly.
Those
yeah.
upper floors are a little bit shorter, but again, we use both of those in order to get what we want out of the code.
Perfect. Okay. My other question I had is on page 92 in the document we received. It's about the review process. And it's not defined when the architectural review committee would be involved. It does define what staff reviews and then when planning commission, but does not talk about when architectural review.
Do you want me to
is-
take this
is-
one or do you want me to? Okay.
Yeah, no, I think we can certainly clarify that in the text.
Okay,
The intent is that if there is an applicant who is going through the form-based code approval process, if there's something in the code that they're not able to meet and are asking for some kind of leeway, that review committee would be convened to come up with a design solution. So by the time it reaches planning commission, there's some resolution that, okay, the architectural review committee has made this recommendation. The applicant has met that, but it's a variation from what the code.
so ARC would review it before coming to the planning commission.
Correct. They would provide design feedback to say, if you're not able to meet this requirement, here's a recommendation that everyone, staff would feel comfortable with, the review committee would feel comfortable
Okay.
with. It's the kind of applying for a variance.
I think it would be good to define that as well,
Sure.
because I didn't really gather that from reading
And I think
Sure.
it's on some of the other like flow charts, but I think we can definitely make it more clear by
Perfect.
putting it in the text.
Thank you.
That's very
Yeah.
doable.
Those were all my questions.
Great questions. Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate the thorough review. Any questions from other commissioners?
Yeah. So one of my questions is, we define the 4 form-based code areas. What process does it look like for us to define additional areas within the city? There's other potential development areas that I
Certainly.
think form-based code would be advantageous within, but what does that process look like for
Yes,
us?
great question. So the cool thing about a form-based code is it's calibrated very specifically to the area that it applies to. So it wouldn't be most likely a situation where we would say, okay, exact same regulations, we're just going to add more area. It probably would be kind of the same process we went through with this one of, okay, we want to maybe introduce a form-based code for this other part of the city. Let's start working on it. And I think there would be lessons learned from this process that would make it probably quicker. But I think the idea with the form-based code is you're calibrating it so carefully to the area that unless it were just another block right adjacent on Fort Union of where we already are, it probably would just be the same process again, likely beginning with direction from the city council for staff to pursue that.
Right. Was there any reason that we left out the gravel pit area or Canyon Center in form-based code with just additional development areas?
My understanding is that the first effort here was really specific to the Fort Union Boulevard master plan. And certainly there are other redevelopment areas in the city that may benefit from a form-based code, but I think this was kind of looked at as this is our first one. Let's keep it in a manageable scope. Let's start there. And then if we like how it goes, which I am confident it will be a good thing, then, replicability is an option. So.
Right.
Yeah, and I think once the city feels more comfortable with the process and knows which questions are asked and sees the outcomes of that, every city that I have worked with, they continue to expand to look for other areas to apply that to. My guess is the process will be much faster next time around, where you've already got the framework. You can say, okay, here are other areas of the city we could apply to. Like Samantha mentioned, this is primarily for redevelopment areas. You can apply it to, a brownfield development like the gravel pit. It's just a different, you'd have different standards for that.
The one exception I will reiterate is it's not a tool for single family. So, most of our city is single family residential. That wouldn't really be used there, but certainly if there are other commercial mixed use multifamily areas in the city that were directed by the city council to look at under a form-based code, I would be happy to do it.
Yeah, I'm excited to be able to introduce this to the city, just going to places outside of the state as well as inside of the state that have implemented it. I've always been incredibly impressed, Rosemary Beach, Seaside, those areas that I guess introduced form-based. It's always, it creates that sense of place and you just, you feel that energy. So I'm excited about it.
I'm so glad to hear that. I think it will have kind of a unique opportunity in that perhaps one of the first projects we will review under it will be our own town center project. And there has been some coordination with the town center advisory committee on kind of some of the basic principles of form-based code so that we're working cohesively. But I think that will be a really unique opportunity to see firsthand, what do we like about this code? What might need to be revised? As the commission is very familiar with, we do code revisions often because codes are meant to be living documents that we change. And I'm sure if adopted, we will be back with edits, but I think it's in a really good spot.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners about form-based code?
I'm not seeing anyone unmute on the Zoom. So again, this will be back on the business session agenda. If as we carry through the next 40 minutes of this meeting, you think of questions, we will have an opportunity to talk through those, and I'll bring back up kind of the procedural prompts for potentially making a motion. But thank you for giving us time on this agenda, and we're excited.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda for our work session is the Old Mill Conceptual Plan. This is the PDD pre-application presentation. And I'll just read what the goal of this is about is this is an introduction to the Planning Commission of conceptual plans for the development of the Old Mill site at 6770 South Big Cottonwood Canyon Road. The property is privately owned and the property owner desires to pursue future development on site using the Plan Development District PDD tool. Prior to submitting a PDD application, property owners are required to introduce concept level development plans to the Planning Commission. And that is what we're here for today. This is not any kind of item that's being formally considered or being voted on. So we will go ahead and move forward with the presentation.
Yeah, I'll just note a few things from the staff perspective, and then I can introduce the
Right.
project representative that will lead the discussion. The Plan Development District, you may hear PDD. That's a zoning ordinance tool in the city that applies to certain areas, like a portion of this old mill property, the gravel pit, and other areas that allows for kind of a different development proposal process. It's a much more hands-on process involved with the city, and can result in developments that are beneficial specifically for the site that they're applied in. So it's not like applying the mixed use zoning, which is available in a lot of different areas of the city. If you apply for a development using the PDD tool, it's specific to that site and that site only. So it requires a lot of back and forth, a lot of public input. The two we've done in the past have both taken about 12 to 18 months of public process before any decision's been made. Just kind of give you an idea of that. Another unique aspect of that is before an applicant can even apply for a development using the PDD tool, as you read, Commissioner Anderson, they're required to achieve a few different pre-application requirements. Almost the very first one of those being a concept plan introduction to the Planning Commission. That will be followed by the actual property owner or property owner's representatives hosting their own public meetings with neighborhoods and with the public, separate from the city process. They've also expressed a willingness to come back to numerous work session meetings to keep this conversation going. This is all to say this is the very, very beginning of the process. And what this is meant for tonight is to give the applicant a chance to engage with the Planning Commission and introduce general concepts. And I do want to clarify, staff hasn't done any sort of formal review against codes or ordinances or master plans to this point. So our position right now is neutral. Our formal review would start later on in this application process. So with all that said, I will introduce Chris Jensen, who is with Think Architecture. I believe he's going to kick off their discussion with you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. As Mike said, my name is Chris Jensen. I'm with Think Architecture. And I want to start off, we appreciate your time and efforts in the service of the city of Cottonwood Heights. As a former planning commission member in another city, I understand what you're going through and the processes and time commitment that you go through. So thank you. And we look forward to working with your group as well as the city, the mayor, city council, as we discuss what's going to happen with this project. As we know, this property is a very important piece in the history of Cottonwood Heights. The owners of the property are deeply committed to preserving the historical significance of the area as we develop plans and concepts for this development. Tonight only begins the process for the owners of the property and the city to begin to establish some goals and outcomes for this property. And we really at this point tonight is just, as we're going to have it's a very high level discussion, but we look forward to your input, your thoughts. We submitted a narrative to you that was written. It talked about some goals, a little bit of the history of what's happened down there, kind of some guidelines, some ideas that we're thinking through, and a series of exhibits. And I'll have Mike share one of the exhibits here in just a minute, but I'd like to just summarize just a few key points for the project. And I think the most important is the vision statement that we spent a lot of time working through. And I wanted to just kind of put that on the record so everybody's aware of it. The idea is to create a residential community that provides transition with types of housing while blending with the existing neighborhoods and to enhance the historical significance of the area. The areas of transition from natural amenities along with recreation trails, open space, landscaping will only enhance the development. Another point was to preserve the legacy and heritage of the old mill through the legacy of design, materials, and historical remembrance. Reclaim the existing mining site with residential housing types that are sensitive to the areas around it. Single-family homes adjoining other single-family homes. Medium density adjoining the Big Cottonwoods Creek and by the stream, and with a little higher density abutting the busy Wasatch Boulevard. So our proposal tonight is to, as you know, and Mike kind of talked about it, to begin this process and discussing a rezone of the property to the PDD zone, Tier 2, as it's outlined in the general plan. Mike, can you pull up that exhibit for me, please? This exhibit is Exhibit G that was in your packet.
Is it this one, Chris?
That is correct. Thank you.
Just for the public, this is all the information that was posted on the website. So this is the information that's shown here is what's posted in the packet as well.
Thank you, Mike. That is correct. Was in the packet. As you can see from this exhibit, the intended and proposed density and locations are noted within the property. And there's two single-family homes that are subdivisions that are adjacent to Big Cottonwood Canyon Road. Those are not within the PDD rezone. Those are currently already rezoned as a R1 zoning and is currently under the process of some plat and some work already being done. So that is not included into this proposal. The intent of that is to have single-family homes. They're platted as single-family homes. So that would provide us a buffer from Big Cottonwood Canyon with the neighboring homes right around it, the Big Cottonwood Canyon Road. It would be west of the Big Cottonwood Creek. And the intent is with the homes across the street being single-family, we would, again, that transition that would go from their existing homes to the stream would be single-family homes. We feel that the density being proposed is considerably less than what could be achieved on the property. And I know what many other developers or property owners may try to achieve. We're proposing, I think, a lesser density than what could even be achieved here. It is our intent to provide a careful and considerate transition between all the existing landowners and to what we're proposing here. The one thing I wanted to bring up, there is no intent for apartments. Rumors have maybe said that we're going to build apartment communities. The intent here is that there is no apartments. These are all for sale product. That is the intent of what we're proposing through this PDD. As noted, the densities that we're proposing, medium to low density townhomes with a density of about 10 units per acre. We have one area, and if Mike can maybe point to it, it's that kind of that tan area up in the top right. We're proposing a condominium project. We located it here for many reasons. One, to pull it away from the visual areas by where the old mill is. Second, to pull it east of the stream, adjacent, closer to Wasatch Boulevard, and to provide the screening from the townhomes in front of it to lessen the impacts. Our density that is being proposed is 120 townhomes, 175 condominiums, for a total of about 295 total residential. With that development, I mean, we're here tonight to hear from you. I mean, this is really what we want to hear from. The only thing we do know is the large issue in the room is probably the old mill. I would like to invite Reagan Shelby to come to the pulpit. She is the owner of the old mill and the property, and she would like to read a statement concerning the old mill. So we would invite her to come up. And once she is complete, we'd like to open the time for you as the planning commissioners to ask questions, provide feedback, input, and any comment to us as a development team. I would like to note that, as Mike said, it is our intent to come back many times. We have tentatively scheduled, if I'm not mistaken, June 27th. We will have our first neighborhood workshop. It will be here in your community room, and there'll be more date and time and to be announced with the mailings that we need to do for those who are around the project. Our intent is to come back in July with more detail, concepts, imagery to talk more in detail. We then have planned a second neighborhood workshop to be the first week of August. And then come back again after we've heard from the neighborhood and input from the planning commission, again, to come back with revisions that address those comments prior to our formalizing an application to start the rezone process in the formal meetings for the PDD. So with that, Reagan?
My name is Regan Shelby. I'm a granddaughter of J.B. Walker, who acquired the old mill in 1927. The address of the property is 6845 South. The old mill has been on the news. Engineering reports confirm that the building must come down. The old mill legacy is important to our family and the community. We are committed to preserving history. Our vision is a beautiful memorial of essential iconic elements that preserve and honor this site. We have contacted the State Historic Society and the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers for input and guidance. We meet with the Cottonwood Heights Historical Committee in July. We have had great dialogue with Cottonwood Heights City. The mayor has agreed to accept regular communication on this effort and has agreed to meet with the owners as needed. Thank you.
With that, we would request input and questions from you.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. I'll just go down my list of questions and, yeah, it's a list. We also have some thoughts from and questions from Commissioner that's not here, and I'll make sure that those are incorporated as well. The first thing is there's, I see on Exhibit G, which I think we have is up now. There's a new trail that's being proposed. Am I understanding that correctly? That is a new trail to replace the current Big Cottonwood
The
Trail,
current
right?
trail, I think, goes right around Big Cottonwood Canyon Road. The intent is within our development is to help establish, right adjacent to the bank of the stream, right through the development. Yes.
So today that the trail runs next to the creek, so that part's not changing. It's
No, it comes adjacent to the road. It comes out around the
right,
road.
but I'm saying when you're like, if you go from the bridge that's there on Big Cottonwood and then you walk that trail goes along, doesn't that go, what is that water? It goes along. Right, I understand there's different sections, but, okay, so what you're proposing is, oh, thank you.
Is to continue it.
Okay,
through
the new,
the-
okay.
The development, yes.
okay. Then my next question is about open space. It's
Yes.
defined that there will be open space. Is the calculation for open space include the slope?
Currently, we haven't gone all the way through that, but it would include part of that, yes.
Okay, let's talk about traffic. Because I think it's not just one of my questions, but also from others as well about the impact of traffic. I believe it said in your narrative that you conducted a traffic study, which is at some point, I guess we would look at, and probably, what is the process that we would also have one done as well, or?
So a traffic study is absolutely a requirement of the full submittal, technical study with, looking at points of ingress and egress and trip generation and site visibility, that the full detailed analysis would be required at the time they make formal application.
Okay. So for a couple of questions about traffic. So I believe if I understood correctly in the narrative that for the egress from the condos, would that go onto Wasatch?
No, there will be no
Nothing
connection.
onto,
We will have no connection between Wasatch Boulevard and this development.
everything's going on to Big Cottonwood?
That is correct.
Okay. So looking at some information, feedback from one of our commissioners who couldn't be here was that a number that we had used in the past was 7 trips per household as a calculation. And if there's 295 residences, that's about 2,000 trips a day added to this road. And so I not having seen the study done that you have had done, I think that that's just something, a concern. Seems to be a lot of traffic for that road to absorb. And I think that 295, I can't remember all the numbers, if that does or does not include the single family.
Does not.
Does not. So then add on top of that, the traffic involved from the single family. So what did your traffic study show in terms of the number of trips?
I don't have that right in front of me, so I would not want to comment on it tonight. I do know that in looking at the development and the total number of residential units that could be put here, we are significantly less than what was calculated and done in his report. His report would allow a significant more density than what we're proposing, and we chose not to try to even reach to that point. So again, the report will be updated once all this feedback is done, revisions are included. We'll go back to Joe Perrins, have him revise all of his traffic numbers. He'll probably come back out, redo counts again. He's been out and have done all the counts to help us preliminarily, but we'll revise it prior to our final draft.
And while I appreciate that, I mean, I just think, I think traffic's a huge concern. So,
Thank you.
and,
Duly noted.
let me see what my other questions were. I appreciate the clarification provided on the historical significance, and I can see how important that is to you and your family. And that's a question that we also received, is what is being done to, there is concern that the old mill is not going to remain. And that it's I don't know, that's one of the concerns shared by the commissioner who's not here, is that the legacy of the old mill it's going to be gone. And so that's a big concern, given that one of your goals was talking about the historical, maintaining or enhancing the historical significance. I'd be interested to hear, besides a memorial to the old mill, what else would be done in terms of that enhancing historical significance?
And I think that we probably are not in a position to discuss that fully from the meetings that we've had that the owners have had with the mayor and members of the city council. They're still working through many items. And so I think it would be good for us to wait until we come back at another meeting that would be able to generate and show that direction.
In regards to the old mill, in the engineering studies that you guys have done, is there opportunity to seismically retrofit the property to retain it? And have there been any cost implications that are behind that?
Yeah, we've done several engineering reports from 2 different independent engineers. Both reports claim that it isn't a significant disrepair to the extent of trying to rebuild it or to seismically upgrade it. We have not gone to that extent of a report yet.
Thank you. I have some other questions if you're finished. What, you might want to jump into the seismic side.
All right, well, I'm outed as the structural engineer in the group. And I
We should have had you come and talk to us.
I don't doubt the discussions you've had with that. Now, I am actually looking at something a little bit broader about, I mean, from an engineering perspective, but about the site itself. Now, I know this is very early and nobody's been doing studies or anything yet, but I can tell you from my perspective, one of the most important pieces of this is looking at the hazards that are currently known along the site. And, you know, Conrad Heights actually has a really great GIS site where all of those areas are well mapped, and, you know, it'll indicate what will trigger a fault trench study. And as luck would have it, you may know already that on that south end of the site, there are some fault traces, and we do have those special study areas. It's kind of you get a little bit, you know, based on those maps, which again, we know are not their general guidelines meant to point you to a future study. But in looking at that, we do have like flood zones, we have slope stability. So these are the kinds of things that I'd be looking for in future versions of this. One very practical question. Oh, sorry, let me go back to that. So along with that, with the creek, PDD does have separate, I guess, requirements or guidelines for a riparian corridor. And so that is also something I was really having a hard time with scale in doing my amateur overlays, but it does look like we might have more area that is intended to be left undeveloped or have can't have non-permeable materials and that sort of thing. So that's something, those are questions that are kind of swirling around in my head as well. So as we look at these different things, it does kind of pull in some of these areas where there are planned townhomes and condos. Then one just very practical question, because I know traffic is something that I've heard from all of my neighbors and friends that are interested. The red line that's indicated through the proposed developments, I'm assuming that those are the two entrances and exits to this development.
That's where we're kind of intending, but
That's
it's
where you're
still to
headed.
be worked through.
Okay.
Right.
And so so we have a main entry point with a feature on that side. And I did notice that was probably intentional, again, maybe based on a few things going on with the creek. But we also have the other tie-in on the other side. So that both of those places will be cars in and out from the development.
Mhm.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
I'll jump in with some more questions. So original density currently, I believe we're primarily R18 in the current density with a little bit of residential commercial and office commercial or office residential as well. Samantha, you might be able to give some more information around that, or
We've got the current zoning that was part of their concept. So that's pulled up there. So on here, it's different than our zoning map colors, but the brown is R18 and then that red is regional commercial. So you're correct.
How many homes are currently allowed with the current zoning?
We haven't calculated based on, I mean, when an application comes in, we look at slopes and hazards and that takes out some of the gross acreage, but 8,000 square feet, that's, roughly 5 units per acre across the whole site.
So, without slope, if this was a flat site, 5 units per acre, you're requesting 10 units per acre. Is that correct?
In certain areas, that's what we had proposed. The condos are a little more than that.
What was the condo per acre that you're requesting?
I think it was
I think it says 35.
35. Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at from 5 units per acre to 35 units per acre in the whole site, based on kind of the current zoning. And then if we look at the master plan, as far as our general plan for land use, mixed use is what's proposed for the majority of the site.
Mhm.
What is our density with mixed use with our current general plan?
35.
35. Okay, so when was the general plan for this specific site, I guess, established?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's been, the land use designation has been mixed use for, for as long as I can remember. It's the mixed use zone, the zoning district that allows, among other uses, residential density up to 35 units per acre.
Okay.
There are
And
additional
that's-
restrictions on building heights and, parking and landscaping and things like that, that influence that, but that is the number.
And that's incredibly helpful because, somebody years ago created general plans, and one of my biggest pet peeves within cities is not implementing general plans from a zoning standpoint. So it's really nice to see this into place because our general plan, which I would imagine was voted on from our council years ago, was looking to the future of, where the city was going. And right now, I mean, that is substantial. As you can see on the map, that's a substantial area for the 35 units per acre. I just rode my bike through this area just on Sunday with my kids in the back. That seems really high. 35 units per acre seem really high. If you get egress on Wasatch, I think that changes things. If you guys are able to work with UDOT and you can actually have in, all of your egress off of Wasatch, I think that just from my opinion, I'm not doing any traffic studies. I think that's going to be an incredibly advantageous experience for everybody. But, 35 units per acre for, a small space, if you can get that egress onto Wasatch, I think that is something that is more tolerable. But I think accessing on Big Cottonwood Canyon Road will be very difficult in that space, especially where we're at 5 units per acre right now. And we all know that general plans are really hard to, kind of push through, even though that was established from the council. But that's not been established yet for the PDD. And I think that getting the community involved in this, it's going to be an uphill battle for everybody involved across the board to get 35 units per acre when that's not the established zoning. But as I'm looking at this and, feeling the site, looking at, all of the hillside and just the sensitive lands that are in place here, if you can find that access on Wasatch Boulevard, I think that that's more tolerable. But outside of that, I think it's going to be really difficult to get many people to kind of work through that just because it's such a tight road. And, I love the concepts. I love kind of looking at what you guys are hoping to do here. But I think that getting up to that 35 units will be very difficult just from my feedback in this space. And looking at other sites and looking at other places that it's done. And if you look at, Park City is a great example of, really sensitive lands, hillside development and all of that. You still don't even see the 35 units on that unless it's in a resort area. And I think with the gravel pit, potentially having some new redevelopments in that area, I think there's going to be some really nice synergies on Wasatch Boulevard that I think is going to be able to be played out quite well. But that egress, I'm looking at this and it's just going to be really hard to get that into place unless you guys have some additional plans as far as what that would look like and how it's going to be more synergistic to the community because you've got large lots right below and you've just got a lot of families in there. And anytime you're around that area, just speaking bluntly in my feedback, and I think understanding a lot of the community, I love the project. I love what you guys are doing. I've been a part of similar projects to this, but I think that evaluating that density and making sure that, we're doing what's right for the community, doing what's right for the health and safety of the community. I would push really hard for getting that access. And I don't know if UDOT is,
We appreciate your
is
input.
open.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is what we're here for tonight is we wanted to hear from you. We wanted to engage in your comments and your thoughts. You know, as I've said, we've have several neighborhood workshops that's still to come. We want to come back. We want to come back and talk some more about what we find with the neighborhood workshops and be able to start showing you concepts and ideas that will address your concerns, your questions, as well as the neighborhood and what we can do to be able to create a wonderful development that will enhance the historical nature down of what that area is, but also just really make it a beautiful environment for by the stream and for those people who would want to live there.
Yeah. And I think that the 10 units per acre is easier to stomach, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the majority of our site is the 10 units per acre. We're only putting that, the condo building up in that one corner. Everything along the stream, everything to the north, is the 10 units per acre. And even to the south, we have a really unique landmark right in the middle. You can see that diagonal area hatched. That is the water aqueduct.
Mm.
So we can't touch it. It's going to be green all the way across it. We can't build over it. There's a considerable easement that with Metro Water that we're having to deal with. And so the only area that we are proposing that higher density is that darker tan. Everything else is tan all along the streams, everything to the north, all around the old mill area. And as you see the blue area, that is the old mill area. So as we work to determine what we do with that historical significance, that's planned for that area and to be a part of this community.
Yeah, and I think that you guys have done a great job putting together some good concepts. Just knowing how these processes go and change and progress within communities. I think this has some great opportunities. And I think, you know, number one priority, I think for the city is preservation. I mean, the old mill site, you know, we all broke into that as kids. No, I'm kidding. I did not. But
Did you see him there yesterday, Doug?
Commissioner,
so
5-minute warning.
yeah,
Thank you.
but you know, I think preservation of that site, I think is incredibly important for the priority of the community and, you know, seeing what opportunities, and I know that those studies are incredibly expensive, but I would definitely recommend, you know, working with Utah Preservation. It sounds like you guys are already doing all of that, but if we can get some additional data as far as, you know, what potential grants are in place to help offset, you know, the cost of any type of retrofit for that, where we can continue to keep that structure, that historical building here, just so that we have that data, you know, what that all looks like. And if they're able to work through any type of process or funding to be able to support that, you know, I would love to see that data. I know that some other folks would as well. And then, you know, really looking at the adjustments of where the higher density is, bringing it to a you know, a much faster paced road than, you know, kind of that quiet Big Cottonwood Creek Canyon road there as well. But I'm loving what I'm seeing and looking forward to continuing through the process.
Well, we are too. Thank you so much for your comments.
So this discussion can continue amongst the commissioners. And if we have other questions, because I don't know if Commissioner Ebler may have had a question or Commissioner Shelton. So apologies. We will get to that for sure. And as we wrap up this meeting, I'd like to encourage everyone before the next meeting, if you haven't already, to complete a card with your name on it that you'd like to speak. Don't all stand up and do it right now. But we'd like to ask you to do that.
Can I add as well, if you have not signed in on the meeting sign-in sheet over there, if you would do that, I'll be putting a few more pages over there momentarily if we run out of space. But
Thank you.
Okay.
from a housekeeping perspective, appreciate that.
Thanks, Samantha. Okay, with that,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Great, thanks.